Coming up on Talking Points, the U.S.-Iran war continues with no near end in sight. How both sides are preparing to escalate the conflict.
Plus, the government shutdown is about to enter its second month. How this could impact your travel plans.
And multiple Illinois elections are taking place tomorrow. How that result could impact midterms. All that and more when Talking Points starts right now. Today marks the 17th day of the U.S. and Israel's war against Iran with no end in sight. Good evening and welcome into Talking Points. I'm Riley Underwood.
And I'm Danielle Blinn. The U.S. is petitioning its allies for help, but with little luck, it seems. Talking Points analyst Megan Acker joins us in the studio with the most recent updates. Megan?
Now, even those Americans who aren't really paying attention to the war overseas, well, they're noticing it when they're filling up their cars. So how have gas prices been affected by everything that's happened? And then what about the other nations? What happened at the latest United Nations Council meeting? Megan, thank you so much. Dutch police are investigating an explosion that damaged an office building in Amsterdam just days after a blast hit a Jewish school in the area. Police say the blast was claimed by the same extremist group that said it was behind the attack originally on the school. It is not clear if the building has a link to Amsterdam's Jewish community. Amsterdam mayor called the attack on the school a cowardly act of aggression toward the Jewish community. Last week in Belgium, a synagogue was rocked by an explosion that was also described as an anti-Semitic attack. These incidents appear to be part of a recent wave of anti-Semitic violence in Europe amid the ongoing conflict in Iran.
And here in the U.S., two attacks happened less than 700 miles away from each other. First, a deadly shooting identified as terrorism devastated a Virginia university, and later that day, a vehicle rammed into a targeted Michigan synagogue. The shooting at Virginia's Old Dominion University was committed by a veteran and convicted ISIS supporter. He killed one person and injured two others before a classroom of ROTC students killed him. Less than 2 hours later, a vehicle with explosive plowed into a synagogue, setting it ablaze while dozens of children were inside. The Michigan attacker was a Lebanese-born U.S. citizen who reportedly lost family members in an Israeli airstrike in Lebanon. He was the only person who died in the attack.
An Afghan man who served alongside U.S. Special Forces and fled his native country after its takeover by the Taliban died this weekend. He died less than a day after he was detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement outside of his Dallas area apartment. He had no known health conditions and had been seeking asylum since his arrival to the U.S. in 2021. DHS said he complained of shortness of breath and chest pains and was transplanted to a Dallas, Texas hospital. The initial report listed no cause of death. This marks the 12th death of a detainee in ICE custody this year.
Coming up on Talking Points, a federal judge is blocking Trump-imposed subpoenas against Jerome Powell. What this means for the central bank when we return.
Welcome back to Talking Points. Today, the Supreme Court announced it will decide whether President Donald Trump can end temporary deportations protections for hundreds of thousands of foreign nationals. The decision came in a pair of emergency appeals involving 6,000 Syrians and around 350,000 Haitians who have lived in the U.S. legally for years. The court deferred a request from the administration to remove protections for those people. Now it considers the bigger question of whether a president may end the temporary protections more broadly. That means the people at issue in the case will keep their legal protections for now.
And a federal judge has squashed subpoenas the Justice Department issued against Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. The ruling is a major blow to President Donald Trump, who has repeatedly criticized Powell for not lowering interest rates. U.S. District Judge James Bousberg wrote in the new opinion that a, quote, mountain of evidence suggests that the government served these subpoenas on the board to pressure its chair into voting for lower interest rates or resigning. He added that the government has produced essentially zero evidence to suspect Chair Powell of a crime. Powell's term expires in May, and Trump has nominated former Fed Governor Kevin Warsh to take his place.
White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles has been diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer. In a Truth Social post, Donald Trump wrote that Wiles has an excellent prognosis and will continue to work virtually full-time at the White House. Trump did not specify how long Wiles is expected to receive treatment or any additional details about her diagnosis.
The Trump administration is planning to replace the White House Visitor Center screening with a brand new underground facility. The proposed facility would be a 7-lane, 33,000-foot visitor security center that would attempt to shorten lines and wait times. The new facility will be built at the site of the old East Wing that has been demolished for a planned ballroom. Both proposals will be discussed and voted on at the National Capitol Building Planning Commission in 2 weeks.
And after a few months of speculation, the Kennedy Center board today unanimously voted in favor to close the complex for 2 years for renovations. Earlier today, President Trump held a meeting in the White House urging the board to approve his plan. The board also voted today in favor of Matt Flocka to become the new CEO following the previous CEO's resignation. The center plans to officially close following July 4th celebrations. And unfortunately, spring break has ended here at Syracuse, but travel is still underway across the country despite an ongoing DHS shutdown. Here with updates on the partial shutdown amid new DHS leadership, it's our analyst, Maya Davis. Thank you so much. And Republican-led states are moving swiftly to implement new voting restrictions. How this could impact upcoming elections, coming up on Talking Points. Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy is fighting for a bitter re-election without the support of President Donald Trump. Cassidy seemed aware of the political backlash he could receive when a year ago he challenged Robert F. Kennedy's skeptical views about vaccines. Now, as Cassidy seeks a third term, Kennedy's supporters haven't forgiven him for his doubts. He now wants to decide whether to confirm Kennedy's ally Casey Means to serve as Trump's Surgeon General. Cassidy faces off in a 3-way primary against Representative Julia Letlow, who has the president's endorsement, and John Fleming, a state treasurer who has tried to establish himself as a conservative alternative in the race. The primary is scheduled for May 16th. And the Senate is set to consider President Trump's sweeping Save America Act next week. Welcome back to the Talking Points. Well, the head of the FCC, Brandon Carr, has been getting a lot of attention this weekend for threatening the licenses of local broadcasters over news coverage he deemed fake. Now Carr has very little power to follow through. Television stations are not at serious risk of being banned from the airwaves because of his statement. The FCC has not denied a license renewal in any decades. And government action against the station would case a legal battle and likely mount a First Amendment case.
However, his comments still carry weight since Carr represents the U.S. government and advances President Trump's policy agenda. Critics are calling Carr's threat authoritarian and unconstitutional. Trump has repeatedly confused the licensing process while attacking national news networks for airing certain shows and asking him particular questions. Now, I think this is a really interesting conversation. We saw a lot of this a few months ago with late night television,
right,
but this is now going after more cable news, and it's a very different story there.
And I think we really haven't seen this before in any other administration. Even the first Trump administration, we heard that's fake news, but there were no real actions behind it. Now, the head of the FCC making threats about not renewing contracts, it all just seems so new.
Yeah, I think the big thing to look at here is cable news has an equal time policy. They are required to give equal time to both sides of both parties when they talk about things. So really they're not doing anything wrong, even if they're asking questions that the president and his administration might deem unconstitutional. If they're giving equal time, they are allowed to ask those questions and do as they please there. Right.
We heard that with the late night and even with the regular news shows. Now, it seems like these might be a lot of threats, and President Trump even accused a lot of them of not wanting America to win the war because of the coverage that he said was biased and a little bit of colluded. But it seems like there just doesn't seem like anything they can actually do.
Yeah, like we mentioned, it's hard to get these licenses taken away from you, especially some of these stations that have had them for hundreds of years since television was around for the first time and got these things. So I don't think anything's really going to come up here.
Well, that's all the time we have for you on this episode of Talking Points. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at CitrusTV News and like us on Facebook. I'm Riley Underwood.
And I'm Danielle Blinn. Have a great night, Syracuse.